Next, we're going to hear the story of a Japanese entrepreneur who was responsible for taking abalone across the Pacific.
Abalone steak is a Western culinary invention popular in many countries. This sumptuous dish, which uses one whole abalone, originated in the US in the early 20th century. Monterey, California. Historically, the nutrient-rich waters off its coast supported a bountiful fishery. At the end of the 19th century, the coastline around Monterey boasted vast numbers of abalone. Eating abalone was not common in California at that time. A Japanese man named Gennosuke Kodani got wind of the situation. In 1897, he headed to the United States. Kodani was born in Shirahama, Chiba, well known as an abalone-producing area. His family was in the seafood business, and he himself was an abalone expert. After Kodani came to America, his younger brother Nakajiro followed, along with abalone divers from their area. At the time, people in the Shirahama seafood industry were struggling to make a living.
There was a dying off of the seaweed in Shirahama's waters. The kelp and other seaweed were being swept away. Since abalone feed on large species of seaweed, this meant their food supply was gone. So, people couldn't catch enough abalone to make a living.
Kodani established a base of operations at the fishing harbour of Point Lobos, 10 kilometres south of Monterey. He was now poised to launch his abalone diving business. But because of the California current, the ocean waters were very cold, and that was tough on the divers. So Kodani introduced diving helmet gear, state-of-the-art for the time. Finally, US abalone fishing could start in earnest. As Kodani had hoped, the amount of abalone seemed virtually limitless. The abalone was dried and exported to Japan and China. But just as the business got on a firm footing, the US placed restrictions on abalone exports. So Kodani turned to selling abalone within the US. He enlisted local investors and set up a canning plant. However, most Americans had never eaten abalone. Kodani faced an uphill battle. You can get an idea of the special efforts Kodani made by looking at the labels on his product's cans.
Here you have recipes. People ate oysters and maybe even scallops, but they had never eaten any spiral shell seafood like abalone. So, he printed recipes on the labels as a way of getting people to try abalone.
Meanwhile, the First World War had broken out. The US began supplying the Allied powers, particularly with exports of meat. This led to a domestic meat shortage and greater consumption of seafood. Kodani's company had its breakthrough. California supermarkets and grocers began stocking Kodani's canned abalone. Americans gradually began to use abalone in soups and other dishes. To draw more people to eating abalone, Kodani hired chefs to develop new ways of preparing the shellfish. They worked hard to make its firm flesh softer and easier to chew. By hitting slices of abalone with wooden mallets, they succeeded in breaking down its fibrous structure and making it soft. And so the abalone steak was born. Now the shellfish was more palatable, and abalone steak was cheaper than beef steak. Slowly but surely, abalone gained popularity in the US. In 1930, Kodani died, and the following year his factory closed. But people have not forgotten his success story. In 1994, 97 years after he originally came to the US, the site of Kodani's former home was designated Kodani Village.